So we talked about this, Cheryl talked about this in the opening, that the world is different right now. And this is probably my favorite New Yorker cover of the year. I think it captures, except there's not a kid here, there's not a baby. Somebody said earlier that, somebody made an appearance. And so, but this New Yorker cover doesn't show it, but it certainly does show a lot of what we've been up against this year. And in terms of how we are practicing law, how we are doing our jobs, how we are negotiating our social lives, as I said. I will tell you, I do not have fuzzy slippers on right now, but I do have wool clogs on because it's very cold where I am. So we do have to deal with something that's different and unusual for us. And we're going to continue in this vein, certainly until it seems like the third quarter, from everything that I read. We're not going to be back until the third quarter where we can have those packed CLE programs again. So, and there's also opportunities. I read in Harvard Business Review earlier this week that the predictions are from all of the prognosticators that our meetings are going to be hybrids for a long time to come, simply because of what we've discovered in terms of convenience and opportunities for participation. So we want to keep that in mind, that we're going to go into a new normal. So when you're talking about meetings for your section or your committee, think about scheduling flexibility. Typically, bar associations would have their meetings at lunchtime, and their committee meetings would be scheduled on a fairly regular basis. I think now we all deserve some flexibility. So think about, for your group, if you are young lawyers, your schedules may be a little bit different and have different kinds of demands than folks who have school-age children, or folks who don't have children but are caring for elderly parents. We're all balancing lots of different things. So be flexible in terms of how you think about your meetings, and work with the KBA staff to figure out what would work best for your group. It is no longer, I don't think, a one size fits all. And we want to help people be flexible and help maximize their participation. Think also too in terms of length of program. If you're planning a CLE or you're planning a special kind of event, what's the maximum that people are going to be willing to be part of a virtual world? So think about that, and think about, again, program times. At lunchtime, does that work best? Does first thing in the morning work best? It's going to vary. And so think about your audience when scheduling. Create guidelines and expectations. So the first, we're in the organizing phase of our bar year here. And so we want to think about what are our expectations for our group? Help your group determine what those expectations are. So, when I've done a program, typically I've sent out, I'm doing a strategic planning retreat on Saturday, and I'm sending out an email tomorrow that says, it's Saturday, dress like you would for a Saturday. Please feel free to, bring, don't worry about your pets or your kids or anything like that. And that's my expectation for this particular group for this coming Saturday afternoon. There are going to be things that we're used to, the Brady Brunch references, but what do you expect as the leader for this group that you are leading in this virtual environment? There are also expectations that we want to set for people to be on time, and we can do that respectfully. We can also request that people use the video. I think this is a pet peeve of mine, quite honestly, just from trying to facilitate meetings and make a meeting very interactive when I'm doing, as I said, a strategic planning session or a board training session, and I want participation. It's really hard when 5 people are on Zoom and using the video, and 3 people are on audio. It's really hard for you as the leader to keep track of and be inclusive of all of the participants. And so we want to optimize the participants, and we want to be able to do that in a way that maximizes that. So you can set an expectation in those committee meetings that were, unless there's a really solid reason, we would really prefer that you use the video, the video capability to participate in this particular call. What do we expect in terms of breaks? If we're meeting over lunchtime, is it okay to bring your lunch? Some people are comfortable with that, some people aren't. How do we want to be together? So you can work with the committee you're leading or the entity you're leading to begin to make those choices, understanding that we want people to be as comfortable as possible. Action item 3, design your agenda with interactivity in mind. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you something interactive, and I'm going to show it live. So there are lots of ways in which to make it interactive. You can use the polling feature. I've asked you to use, if you wanted to use the emoji feature. And then there are other online tools that help us do that. One is a Miro board. This is a screenshot of a live Miro board, which has Post-it notes, like if we were in person and we were doing this, and I split you up into small groups and I gave you an assignment about, come up with a perfect leadership chair. What are the kinds of attributes would that person have? And I gave you a bunch of Post-it notes. You can do this online in real time with a Miro board. And so I've been using this technique in some leadership training I've been doing and some planning I've been doing. And then those boards are available. So if you have a topic that you want to brainstorm, it's a perfect opportunity to be able to do that.
Elizabeth,
Question.
so there's a comment from Judge Bachnight.
Oh, okay.
I have a question too. So my comment was for everybody to have their screen name reflect what they would really like to be called. So, and I sort of called out a few people that I know and love. But also, how do you do that thing you were just talking about? Is that in Zoom, specifically to Zoom, or is there some other program?
The Miro board?
Yes.
Yeah, Judge, Zoom has a whiteboard capability, but Miro is a separate online platform. And at the end, I will show that to you. I didn't want to navigate out of the PowerPoint, but I will show you in real time, and I'll put the link in the chat. And so we can play with it a little bit so you can see that. But your point about using actual names as an expectation is an excellent one. Is an absolutely excellent one. And one of the things I was going to talk about a little later is I've been working with a very large legal services provider, and we were meeting every other week. 5 subcommittees were meeting every other week. And I had never met these people because the planning process had started after the pandemic. And so, as I said, there were 5 subcommittees of 20 people on each subcommittee. And I kept calling on this one person who was calling in or Zooming in, and I was calling her by the screen name. And finally, after the 3rd meeting, she said, "You know what? My name is Shelley. That's my son's name." And she never sent me a message in the chat, and I was really embarrassed and I felt really bad. But not having met people before, and I couldn't remember when we'd done introductions, having met 100 people in a week, who everybody was. So you're absolutely right, Judge, and I've experienced that and been embarrassed by my own reaction to that. So again, this is a way in which to use the platform's capabilities. You can change your screen name. You can use all of the, you can use the polling device. You can use, there's a really fun thing if you want to start the meeting off that's fun. Under the video settings, you can add like funny hats, you can add mustaches. I signed on to a meeting recently with a group that I'm working with, and the whole staff had different like hats on and sunglasses. And it really lightened the mood on a Monday morning to have that capability. So we want to set something that says we're collaborative and that we're having these opportunities. The Bernie background we saw earlier, the beautiful bistro background that Cheryl joined us from, are all capabilities in Zoom. One of the things I recommend in the handout is you can do an icebreaker for your meeting and ask folks, hey, the next time we come on Zoom for our meeting, use your favorite vacation spot that you have a photograph of for your background. And that's really another fun way to get to know each other and to go around the room and say, Beth, where is your background? One group reported that they all like to travel. So that would be a really good way in which to have that manifest itself as we get to know one another. Let's see, I'm just checking to see if there were any more questions. So again, explore, play around with it, do it with your family, explore those capabilities that we have on Zoom. Item 5, build breaks into your program. If you are doing a CLE program, if you are doing a program with a lot of sort of talking heads and presentations, Zoom can be exhausting. We all know that. And if you've been with the judge at hearings all day long, and then you're going into a bar committee meeting as well, or a section meeting or another event, just build in some breaks. Just build in some breaks. And I think that's a respectful thing to do for everybody, even if it's just 2 minutes, to say, everybody turn off your video for 2 minutes if people need to use the restroom and they want to refill their coffee. I have found people much more respectful of break times on Zoom than they even are in person. If I say 2 minutes, people are generally back in 2 minutes. So think about when you might need a break as part of that meeting. Again, coffee refill, restroom, something's popping up on somebody's screen that they feel that they need to attend to fairly quickly. We talked earlier about setting expectations. This goes to that as well. What are the expectations for electronic devices? I was telling Marcia yesterday that I'm doing a search for a bar association, and I've been interviewing board members. And I was interviewing a board member on Zoom the other day. It was a half-hour conversation, just the two of us. And every 30 seconds, his text message went off. And it was so distracting. I kept losing my train of thought as I was trying to ask him what I was hoping were very thoughtful questions. And so if we can ask people to mute your phones, turn off the notifications at the start of the meeting, it will make things also run much more smoothly. Action item 6, include discussion items on your agenda. If you are talking about a committee meeting with an agenda, people are often hesitant to participate on Zoom, and the meetings can feel a little bit too much like just listening and not participating. So throw out some items that may be a little bit controversial or a little bit about your experience. And I find a great question is to ask, so what's your experience with this? So say there's an issue, you're talking about some new real estate regulations that are coming out. You know what, you might go around the horn of your Brady Bunch boxes and say, so Susan, what's your experience with this? That will draw people in a way that just asking the question, well, you know, does this really fit what we want or not? People may be reluctant to have an opinion, but they're less reluctant to share their own experience. So include those items that may generate some very helpful conversation and insight. Action item 7, schedule guests for your meeting. So if you're not talking about a program meeting where you're doing a CLE, think about guests. You know, courts committees have judges come. And one thing I've noticed is the degree to which bar associations in particular are having really high profile guests for some of their committee meetings or their section meetings, because people don't have to travel and are more available. And there was a headline this morning in the New York Law Journal that Senator Klobuchar was at the New York State Bar Association's antitrust annual meeting. Well, in the best of circumstances, I doubt in January that Senator Klobuchar would have been able to make it to the antitrust section's annual meeting, which would have been held in New York this week. Simply just schedules typically don't permit that. And apparently she has a new book out on antitrust. Well, they were able to have her come and talk about her antitrust book. And so think about that this gives us some new opportunities to have a guest speaker who may not be able to otherwise fit into our schedule, not necessarily for CLE purposes, but it enriches the committee experience to talk about something perhaps that the committee's addressing. This is particularly true with officials, legislators, judges, just have more opportunity for interaction. So think about how you can liven that up. And who knows, somebody, maybe John Grisham would show up for a program for you because he can do it remotely. I've done a lot of book readings remotely, and there are authors all over the country who are doing them for very small independent bookstores. And that's just because they can do it and not have to travel. Review the rules of the road at the top of the meeting. We talked earlier about setting expectations and earlier. And so again, it's the same thing when we start our meetings. You know, we do it as an organizing principle, but we can run through it at the top of the meeting. Hey, everybody, please remember to please remember to mute your phones, put them on silence. We're going to start on time. We're going to end on time. All of the things that we expect you to participate. I'm going to do a poll. We're going to do this. And I hope you'll join me in participating in this way. Action item 9, don't do it all yourself. I think this is really important with the technology. You want some backup, so you're not flying solo. And by that, I mean, appoint someone, ask someone who is part of your committee, part of your section council, whatever, to monitor the chat. I asked Marcia to do that today. Ask someone to be the person, the co-host that's going to bring up perhaps the audio visual devices. Have someone who's willing to keep the roster. And if there are follow-up action items, to make note of those. It's really difficult to both monitor what's going on in the chat, watching people raise their hands, as well as take notes on the follow-up action items. So if your entity doesn't have a secretary, rotate it among volunteers to say, hey, will you keep that list of action items and do the recap at the end of the meeting? It'll help keep you on track a little bit more than it would otherwise. Again, have someone monitor the technology. If there isn't a KBA staff member available, they're happy to do that if they are. And so that you can concentrate on facilitating the meeting and moving it forward. The roster, I think the roster is very important. It goes back to the judge's point about who's there and signing in with your real name. And that's an expectation, again, that you can put at the top of your meeting. Hey, everybody, if you haven't signed in with your real name, and, you know, I know of folks who've had their kids like change the name on the Zoom account. So like Razzmatazz Mom comes up. If you want to be Razzmatazz Mom in your Zoom meeting, you can be Razzmatazz Mom at your Zoom meeting, but you may ask people to, particularly as you get to know who the new people are in your committee, and if you're not familiar with them, that saying hey you or the person in the upper left-hand box is not exactly as polite as we would like to be. So again, setting expectation, use the roster, have a roster handy so you know who's in the meeting and who may be on audio and who may be just calling in. That's really helpful for that as well. Start the meeting with an icebreaker. Somebody said earlier that in their breakout room that they discovered they all had Netflix in common. I think we all have Netflix in common at this point. But you know, what's everybody watching on Netflix? I mean, what other kinds of, what's your favorite streaming device? Is Apple TV Plus worth it? Has anybody watched Ted Lasso? What do you recommend? We're all looking for movie recommendations. I know half of my social conversations are about, is there anything else to watch? I mean, what are you keeping occupied with? And it's really helpful to see, to listen to what other people are listening to, what they're watching, what any new podcasts we're into. That's an easy icebreaker. Another easy icebreaker for the top of a meeting to get people comfortable. We're trying to almost formalize those conversations we used to have when we were walking into a conference room. Remember those days? And we would have those conversations. Oh my gosh, did you see that basketball game last night? Did you see how the Duke Blue Devils got beat? I mean, really, we want to engage in those conversations in a virtual sense, and we may have to be a little formal about how we do it by starting the meeting that way. And you can use the chat to capture those recommendations. The other thing about doing an icebreaker, you can also ask people to celebrate. You know, tell us something good that's happened between the last meeting and our meeting now. You know, my kid won a contest. You know, the dog finally got trained. You know, all of those things we want to celebrate. I won a big case. I scored a new client. So much of what we're missing is the social camaraderie and the ability to celebrate. And I think we've discovered how many small ways we used to do that. And so if we can begin to do that as part of our leadership responsibility to bring people together to do that, that's a really nice thing. You know, there's the old saying about people won't remember what you told them, but you'll remember how they will remember how you made them feel. So part of leadership in our context of committees and sections and young lawyers is to make people feel included, as Cheryl said in the introductions. And so we want to be able to do that, and finding those commonalities around Netflix or Hulu or Apple TV is one way of doing that. Follow the agenda. You know, having an agenda for a meeting is really important. Following the agenda, unless something like blows up unexpectedly in the context of the meeting, is also important. It tells your colleagues that you're respectful of their time. Also, you can create some expectations around weighing in on an issue. So if you have a controversial issue, if you have an issue that has many points of view, I mean, and that can even be where to hold an event, for example, when we can hold events again. It's really nice to make sure that, and it's very helpful to make sure that everybody feels heard. And so one way of doing that is to just sort of stop and say, where is everybody on this? And you can, again, you can use the thumbs up, you can use the chat. You can, if you have the time, you can go around and call on each person and ask them to briefly weigh in on where you are. And that will help move your agenda along. It will help you sort of figure out where the group is. And that's an important skill to have. Again, to be inclusive and to come to resolution on some of those issues. I have seen over the years very long debates over things that ultimately weren't going to matter that much, but got bogged down. And this is true, as the judge says in the chat, this is true about every meeting, not just virtual meetings. So as I said at the top, some of this is translatable. The best thing we want to be is respectful of everybody's time. And so you want to use those techniques to be able to do that. Action item 13, pay attention to now. I know a lot of us are thinking about what's next on our boards and organizationally. So we've got almost this dual mindset going on where we're thinking about what do we need to do for our committees and sections, and then we're thinking about, well, gee, when we meet again, when can we meet again, and how do we plan for that? And things are going to open up. And I even know personally for travel, like, should you make reservations now to go on vacation in October because it'll be better to travel again? We're trying to do that. And so, but pay attention to what you can do now in your committees and sections to lay the groundwork for what's next. So I guess that's my action item tip for thinking about what's ahead. Action item 14. And we're going to do a poll now. Marcia's going to set up the poll. This is about being inclusive. And I would like you to fill out this poll. And the questions are, how did you get involved in the KBA? So the choices are, it has been so long I don't remember. I called the office or sent an email and said, what can I do to help? Someone with a professional relationship asked or made the suggestion. Someone with a personal relationship asked or made the suggestion. So I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to complete the poll, and then we're going to talk about this. Seeing how many people are here. Okay, almost everybody was. And someone in the chat is also offering another suggestion that it was just expected. And that was true. Certainly at one time, everybody joined the County Bar Association. It was expected, and someone in the office typically filled out the application for you or told you that that was the case. Amanda says in the chat, I physically went to the office in person. I've done this poll for 25 years. I have asked hundreds and hundreds at this point of lawyers, how they got involved in their bar associations. And typically, and the results here are no different. So approximately 78% of the respondents, if my math is correct, 79, were invited to participate. They were asked to participate. In the remaining group are people who are self-starters, people who fill out the coupon, people who send the email. They're Amanda who goes to the office and says, here I am, find something for me to do. In all of the surveys that I've done when I've asked this question, 80% of the participants were asked or encouraged by somebody else, either through a professional relationship or both for membership and involvement. Typically, that's the case. Mostly involvement as opposed to, filling out the membership form because you think it's a good idea. But again, membership involvement is a very personal ask. Again, no matter the size of the organization, I've done this at the State Bar of Texas, which has 110,000 members. And I've done it with bar associations that have 300 members. Everybody was asked to be involved in some way. Everybody was asked. So my entreaty to you is to figure out who you're going to ask. Who are you going to invite as a leader to involvement in the association? Who are you going to invite? That's your leadership charge. So again, involvement is equated to a personal ask. So part of our responsibility also as leaders is to grow the next generation of leaders. So who's behind us that we will bring into the organization as a leader? Action item 15, think about opportunities for fun. We talked a little bit about this earlier. I mentioned at the top of the presentation, I mentioned my my holiday party, musical bingo holiday party. There are lots of opportunities to have fun. There are some suggestions in your handout, from musical bingo to office scavenger hunts to trivia contests to cooking demonstrations and virtual beer tastings and wine tastings and spice opportunities with a local spice store that I attended. So there are lots of things you can do in this regard. One bar association, the Johnson County Bar Association, is doing virtual museum tours for its members. So if you have a particular topical interest for Holocaust Remembrance Day, they're doing a tour today of the Illinois Holocaust Museum. And so that's an opportunity for you to engage with your members and do something social and give them a unique experience. So think of what those opportunities are for your section or for your committee to do. Most of them are really cost effective. So it's not going to be a break the bank situation. But again, it brings people together and creates some commonality. Extend grace. Every day is different for everybody. Some people are caring for elderly parents. Some people have children at home and children in school. Some folks are trying to get all of their billable hours in while balancing a whole lot of other things. And so I think the best thing that we can all do as leaders is to extend grace around around deadlines, around participation, and understand that wellness is really important to us as leaders and to those that we lead, and for our families and our partners and our associates and our law firms and those with whom that we deal with on a daily basis. And I personally have found myself getting sometimes a little short with people in the grocery store who are going the wrong way down a one-way aisle, and or something that is that simple can be in this age a little bit off-putting, and little things can set us off. And so I think we all have to be really conscious of how we want to be with one another and be really helpful to other people. It is so commendable that people are stepping up to the plate in this time, and so much leadership is happening in such a really positive way to really make our associations the best that they can be and give our members the best experience that they can have. And so we want to extend that grace to one another, but we also want to extend it to ourselves as leaders. And so don't be afraid to rely on other people. Don't be afraid to ask for help. The staff is there to assist you and make sure that you have a successful leadership experience. And we are also grateful of your willingness to be part of this community of Knoxville attorneys that make the practice better, that makes the lives of its members better. And that's really, really important. And so don't ever forget that, and don't take it for granted in yourself or in other people, because it's super important.